The blood on Sarah Callahan's hands belonged to her husband, and she could not make herself cry even as his final breath rattled through the stillness of their small homestead just outside Las Vegas, Nevada, in the summer of 1878. She knelt beside the body of Thomas, who had been gored by the bull they had purchased only 3 weeks prior, and felt something inside her chest crack open, not with grief, but with a strange, unwelcome clarity. She was 23 years old, a widow, and the only thought that came to her mind as she finally stood and wiped her palms against her skirts was that the chickens still needed feeding before nightfall. The bull would have to be put down, but the chickens would go on laying eggs, and life would continue in the way it always did, indifferent to human suffering, relentless in its forward march. She washed Thomas's body herself, dressed him in his Sunday best, and rode into town the next morning to arrange for the undertaker and the preacher. Las Vegas was a rough cluster of buildings that had sprung up along the rail line, a place where prospectors and cowboys and desperate families converged with dreams of silver or land or simply survival. The streets kicked up dust that coated everything in a fine brown powder, and the sun beat down with the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and dance. Sarah moved through the town with her shoulders straight and her face composed, accepting condolences from neighbors who had known Thomas, who had traded with him or shared whiskey with him on Saturday nights. "Such a tragedy," Mrs. Henderson said, gripping Sarah's hands with her own weathered ones. "How will you manage out there alone?" "I will manage," Sarah said, and she meant it. She had been managing since she was 14 years old, when her own parents had died of fever and left her and her younger brother to fend for themselves. She had managed when her brother had run off to California at 16, chasing gold that probably did not exist. She had managed when Thomas Callahan had offered her marriage and stability, and she had accepted, even though her heart had not raced at the sight of him, even though she had known with a quiet certainty that love was something other people experienced, not her. The funeral was simple. They buried Thomas in the small cemetery on the edge of town, where wooden crosses marked the graves of others who had died too young, struck down by illness or accident or violence. Sarah stood in her black dress and listened to the preacher talk about God's plan and eternal rest, and she thought about the bull in the barn, about whether she should sell it or slaughter it, about how she would need to hire help for the harvest if the corn came in as well as it looked like it might. When it was over and the last handful of dirt had been thrown onto the coffin, Sarah walked back toward where she had tied her horse. That was when she saw him for the first time, though she did not know then that he would become the axis around which her life would turn. He was standing near the fence that bordered the cemetery, a tall man with broad shoulders and a hat pulled low over his face. He was watching the proceedings with an expression she could not read, something haunted and distant, as though he were looking at ghosts instead of mourners. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Sarah felt a strange jolt run through her, something that might have been recognition, even though she had never seen this man before in her life. Then he turned and walked away, his boots kicking up little clouds of dust, and Sarah shook her head and mounted her horse and rode home to her empty house and the bull that had killed her husband. The days that followed were a blur of work and silence. Sarah rose before dawn and worked until her body ached with exhaustion, tending to the animals and the garden and the endless list of tasks that accompanied life on a homestead. She found that she preferred the exhaustion, preferred the way it left no room for thoughts or feelings, no space for the grief that she knew she should be experiencing but somehow could not access. At night she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for tears that never came. It was on the 8th day after the funeral that the cowboy appeared at her door. Sarah was in the garden, pulling weeds from between the rows of corn, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She stood and shaded her eyes against the sun, watching as a rider came up the long dirt path that led to her house. As he drew closer, she recognized him as the man from the cemetery, the one who had been watching the funeral with that strange expression on his face. He dismounted when he reached the fence, moving with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. Up close, Sarah could see that he was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges and eyes that were a startling shade of blue. His face was tanned and weathered, marked with the kind of lines that came from squinting into the sun and sleeping under the stars. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I am sorry to intrude. My name is Cole Nolan. I was wondering if you might have any work available." Sarah wiped her dirty hands on her apron and studied him carefully. "What kind of work are you looking for, Mr. Nolan?" "Whatever needs doing," he said. "I am good with horses and cattle. I can mend fences, fix roofs, help with the harvest. I am a hard worker, and I do not drink or cause trouble." "Why would you want to work here?" Sarah asked. "There are bigger ranches around, places that could pay better." Cole looked away, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I am not looking for a big ranch. I prefer something smaller, quieter, and I will work for room and board and whatever you can spare. I do not need much." Sarah should have been more cautious. She should have asked for references or sent him away, or at least taken more time to think about it. But there was something in his eyes that she recognized, a kind of emptiness that mirrored her own, and she found herself nodding before she had fully made the decision. "I have a small bunkhouse out back," she said. "It is not much, but it is dry and has a stove. I can pay you a small wage and you will eat at the house. In exchange, I need help with the animals and getting the fields ready for harvest." "That sounds fair," Cole said. And for the first time, something that might have been relief flickered across his face. He moved his things into the bunkhouse that afternoon, and Sarah went back to her work in the garden, trying not to think too much about the fact that she had just hired a complete stranger to live on her property. But when evening came and she rang the bell for supper, Cole appeared at the back door with his hat in his hands and his boots wiped clean, and he sat at her table and ate the beans and cornbread she had prepared without saying much of anything at all. Over the next few weeks, Sarah learned that Cole was a man of few words and fewer smiles. He rose before she did and worked until well past dark, fixing the broken gate on the chicken coop and repairing the roof of the barn and mucking out stalls with a steady, methodical efficiency. He never complained and never asked for anything beyond what she had already offered. At meals, he answered her questions with brief, polite responses, but never volunteered information about himself. Sarah found that she did not mind his silence. There was something restful about it, about the way he simply did what needed to be done without expecting praise or conversation. She had grown tired of people in town asking her how she was coping, offering sympathy that felt hollow and performative. Cole did not offer sympathy. He simply worked alongside her, and somehow that felt more genuine than all the well-meaning words from her neighbors. It was almost 3 weeks after Cole had arrived that Sarah finally learned something real about him. They were working together to bring in the hay from the upper field, loading the wagon in the brutal afternoon heat. Sarah had just handed Cole another bundle when her foot caught on a rock and she stumbled forward, losing her balance. Cole caught her by the arm, steadying her, and for a moment they stood close enough that Sarah could see the scar that ran along his jaw, pale and slightly raised. "Thank you," she said, stepping back. "You need to be more careful," Cole said, but there was no censure in his voice, only a kind of weary concern. "I am always careful," Sarah said, "but sometimes things happen anyway." Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You are talking about your husband." It was not a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. Thomas was always careful around the animals. He had been working with cattle his whole life, but the bull was new, and we did not know its temperament. One moment Thomas was in the pen, and the next— She trailed off, shaking her head. "It does not matter. What happened, happened. I cannot change it." "You do not seem angry about it," Cole said slowly. "What good would anger do?" Sarah asked. "Thomas is dead. Being angry will not bring him back. I would rather focus on what I can control." Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring out across the field toward the mountains that rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the heat. "I wish I had your perspective," he said finally. "I have spent the last 2 years being angry at things I cannot change, and it has gotten me nowhere except alone and drifting." It was the most he had said at one time since arriving at the homestead, and Sarah felt something tighten in her chest, a strange ache that might have been empathy. "What happened?" she asked softly. Cole was silent for so long that Sarah thought he would not answer. Then he let out a long breath and sat down on the edge of the wagon, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I had a ranch in Texas," he said. "Not a big one, but it was mine. I had built it up over 10 years, put everything I had into it. I was going to ask a woman to marry me, a school teacher from town. Her name was Emma, and she had red hair and laughed at my jokes even when they were not funny." He paused, his hands clenching and unclenching in his lap. There was a drought, the worst anyone had seen in decades. The creek dried up, and the grass turned brown and brittle. I watched my cattle die one by one, watched everything I had worked for just wither away. I tried to save it. I took out loans I could not afford, bought water from neighbors at prices that bankrupted me. But it was not enough. Sarah sat down beside him on the wagon, not touching him but close enough that he would know she was listening. "I lost the ranch," Cole continued, his voice flat and emotionless. "The bank took it. And Emma, she said she could not marry a man with no prospects, no future. She married the banker's son instead. I spent a year drunk and angry, working odd jobs and picking fights and generally being useless. Then one morning I woke up in a jail cell in El Paso, and I realized that I had become someone I did not recognize." "So you came here," Sarah said. "So I came here," Cole agreed. "I have been drifting west for months, working where I can, trying to figure out who I am now that everything I thought I was has been taken away. When I saw you at the funeral, standing there so calm and composed, I thought maybe you had some secret, some way of dealing with loss that I had not figured out yet." Sarah almost laughed, but she swallowed it down. "I do not have any secrets," she said. "I just keep moving forward because that is what you do. You get up and you do the work that needs doing, and eventually enough time passes that the sharp edges of grief wear down a little. And you look for the things that are still good, the things that are still worth protecting." "Like what?" Cole asked, turning to look at her. Sarah thought about it, her eyes scanning the field, the mountains, the sky that stretched endless and blue above them. "Like the fact that the corn is going to be good this year," she said. "Like the way the chickens come running when I call them. Like how the sun sets behind those mountains every evening and paints the whole world orange and pink. Thomas is dead, and that is a tragedy. But the chickens still lay eggs, and the corn still grows, and life keeps going. There is something beautiful in that, I think. Something worth holding on to." Cole stared at her as though she had said something profound, though to Sarah it seemed like simple common sense. "You really believe that?" he said. "I have to," Sarah replied, "because the alternative is to give up, and I am not ready to do that yet." They sat in silence for a while longer, and then Cole stood and offered her his hand to help her up. "We should finish loading this wagon before dark," he said. Sarah took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Yes," she agreed. "We should." After that conversation, something changed between them. It was not a dramatic shift, not something that could be pointed to and named, but Sarah felt it nonetheless. Cole began to talk more at meals, sharing small stories about his travels or asking Sarah about her own past. She told him about her parents, about her brother who had disappeared into the California goldfields and never returned, about the years she had spent surviving on her own before marrying Thomas. "Did you love him?" Cole asked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Sarah considered the question carefully. "I respected him," she said. "He was a good man, a kind man. But love? I am not sure I know what that feels like. Thomas needed a wife, and I needed security. It was a practical arrangement, and we were both content with it." "That sounds lonely," Cole said quietly. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but I learned a long time ago that you do not always get what you want in life. You get what you get and you make the best of it. Cole shook his head slowly. You say things like that, but I do not think you really believe them. Not deep down. What do you mean? Sarah asked, frowning. I mean that you are not just making the best of a bad situation, Cole said. You are actively choosing to see the good in it. There is a difference. When you talk about the chickens or the corn or the sunsets, you are not settling for less. You are finding joy in what you have. That takes strength, Sarah. More strength than I have ever had. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, and she looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. I just do what needs doing. No, Cole said, his voice firm. You do more than that. You give meaning to it. You transform tragedy into something bearable, even beautiful. I have been watching you these past weeks, and I have learned more from you than I learned in 2 years of drifting and feeling sorry for myself. Sarah did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear, and Sarah felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, something that might have been hope or possibility, or the very beginning of something she had thought she would never experience. The summer wore on, hot and dry and relentless. Sarah and Cole worked side by side through the long days, bringing in the harvest and preparing for winter. The corn came in better than Sarah had dared to hope, and they sold most of it in town for a good price. With the money, Sarah was able to pay off some of Thomas's debts and even set a little aside for the future. Cole proved to be not just a hard worker, but also someone with a good head for business. He suggested ways to improve the irrigation in the fields and talked Sarah through the process of breeding her best-laying hens to increase egg production. He fixed things she had not even realized were broken and built a new shed for storing feed that was better designed than the old one. But more than that, he became her friend. They talked in the evenings about everything and nothing, about books Sarah had read and places Cole had traveled, about philosophy and politics, and whether or not there was life after death. Cole made her laugh with his dry observations about the people they encountered in town, and Sarah found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had kept locked away for years. One evening in late September, as they were closing up the barn for the night, Cole suddenly said, Sarah, can I ask you something personal? Sarah looked up from latching the barn door. Of course. Do you ever get scared? Cole asked. About the future, about being alone, about what might happen? Sarah thought about it, really thought about it. Sometimes, she admitted. Late at night, when the house is too quiet and I start thinking about all the things that could go wrong. But then morning comes, and there is work to do, and the fear does not seem as big in the daylight. Cole nodded slowly. I get scared all the time, he said. I am scared that I will never amount to anything, that I will never have anything of my own again. I am scared that I will spend the rest of my life drifting from place to place, never belonging anywhere. You belong here, Sarah said, and the words were out before she had time to think about them, before she could second guess or take them back. Cole's head snapped up, his eyes searching her face. Do I? Yes, Sarah said, more certain now. You have made this place better, Cole. Not just the physical things, the repairs and improvements, but everything. It is not so lonely anymore. I am not so lonely anymore. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Sarah could not name. Cole took a step toward her, then stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. Sarah, I need you to know something. When I came here, I was looking for work and a place to rest, but somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job. You stopped being just an employer. I care about you. I care about what happens to you. Sarah's heart was beating so hard, she was sure Cole could hear it. I care about you too, she said softly. I know I have nothing to offer you, Cole continued, the words tumbling out now as though he had been holding them back for too long. I have no money, no property, no prospects to speak of, but I am not the same man who showed up here 3 months ago. You have changed me, Sarah. You have taught me that loss does not have to define a person, that there is always something worth fighting for, always some good to be found even in the worst circumstances. You have given me hope when I thought I would never feel hopeful again. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, the first tears she had shed since Thomas died. But these were not tears of grief or loss. These were tears of something else entirely, something that felt like joy and terror all mixed together. You have given me something too, she said. You have shown me that I am capable of more than just surviving, that there might be more to life than just getting through each day. When I look at you, I see possibility. I see a future that I want instead of one that I am just enduring. Cole closed the distance between them in two long strides and took her hands in his. His palms were warm and rough against her skin, and Sarah felt a shiver run through her that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. I want to stay, Cole said, not just as a hired hand, but as a partner, someone who builds this place with you, who shares the work and the worries and the good things too. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Is this a proposal? Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. Cole smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. I suppose it is. I know it is too soon, and I know I do not have a ring or any of the things a woman deserves when a man asks for her hand. But I love you, Sarah Callahan. I love the way you find beauty in ordinary things. I love your strength and your practicality and the way you never give up. I love the person I become when I am with you. So yes, this is a proposal. Will you marry me? Sarah looked up at him, at this man who had wandered into her life when she needed him most, and she realized that for the first time in her entire life, she was not just making a practical choice. She was choosing something she wanted, something that made her heart race and her hands tremble and her whole world feel brighter and more vivid. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Cole let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. Sarah held on to him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the gathering darkness, while the chickens settled in the coop and the horses shifted in their stalls, and the world continued turning with its usual indifference. But Sarah did not feel indifferent. She felt alive in a way she never had before, aware of every sensation, every sound, every moment as it unfolded. When Cole finally pulled back and cupped her face in his hands, when he bent his head and kissed her gently, tentatively, Sarah kissed him back with all the hope and possibility she had been carrying inside her without even knowing it. They were married in October, in the same small church where Thomas's funeral had been held. It should have felt strange or wrong, but somehow it did not. Sarah wore a new dress that she had sewn herself, pale blue with white lace at the collar, and Cole wore a suit he had bought in town with his wages. The ceremony was simple, attended by a handful of neighbors and friends, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah felt a surge of pure happiness that took her breath away. The reception was held at the homestead, with tables set up in the yard and food brought by the neighbors who had come to wish them well. Mrs. Henderson cornered Sarah at one point, her eyes shrewd and knowing. I worried about you after Thomas passed, she said. But I see now that you are going to be just fine. Better than fine, I think. I am happy, Sarah said, and it felt like a revelation to say the words out loud. Truly happy. You deserve it, dear Mrs. Henderson said, patting her hand. You have had more than your share of hardship. It is good to see you getting a second chance. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Cole found Sarah standing by the fence, looking out at the fields they had worked together all summer. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on top of her head. What are you thinking about? He asked. I am thinking about how strange life is, Sarah said. 6 months ago, I was a widow with no idea how I was going to manage on my own. Now I am standing here with a husband who loves me, with a successful harvest behind us, and a whole future ahead of us. If someone had told me this would happen, I would not have believed them. I know what you mean, Cole said. 6 months ago, I was about as lost as a person can be. I had given up on the idea that things could get better. But then I met you, and you showed me that there is always hope, always a reason to keep going. You taught me that by example, Sarah, every single day. Sarah turned in his arms so she could look up at him. We taught each other, she said. I showed you how to find hope, and you showed me how to feel joy. We make a good team. The best team, Cole agreed, and kissed her again, longer and deeper this time, while their neighbors discreetly looked away and gave them their privacy. That night, after the guests had left and the tables had been cleared away, Sarah and Cole lay together in the bed that had once been hers alone. Cole held her close, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder, and they talked in quiet voices about their plans for the future. They would expand the garden next year, plant an orchard if they could afford the saplings. They would breed the horses and maybe buy more land if the opportunity presented itself. They would build a life together, brick by brick, day by day, finding the good in whatever came their way. I never thought I could be this happy, Cole murmured into the darkness. I thought happiness was something that had passed me by, something I did not deserve after everything I had lost. Everyone deserves happiness, Sarah said firmly, even people who have made mistakes or suffered losses. Especially those people, maybe. How did you get so wise? Cole asked, a smile in his voice. I am not wise, Sarah protested. I just refuse to let tragedy be the only story of my life. There is always more to the story, always another chapter waiting to be written. Then let us write a good one, Cole said, the best one we can. Winter came, cold and harsh, but Sarah and Cole weathered it together. They spent the long evenings by the fire, with Sarah sewing or reading, while Cole whittled wood into small figurines or repaired tack. They talked endlessly, learning each other's histories and habits, sharing dreams and fears and the mundane details of daily life. When snow blanketed the fields and made travel difficult, they were content to be snowed in together, safe and warm in their small house. It was during one of those snowy evenings that Cole asked Sarah about the bull that had killed Thomas. You never talk about it, he said. About what happened, I mean. Do you still blame the animal? Sarah set down her sewing and thought about the question. I did at first, she admitted. When it first happened, I hated that bull. I wanted to shoot it myself, wanted to make it pay for what it had taken from me. But then I realized that the bull was just an animal, acting on instinct. It was scared or confused or just being territorial. It did not kill Thomas out of malice. It was just a tragedy, a terrible accident. What happened to it? Cole asked. I sold it the week after the funeral, Sarah said, to a rancher who needed a breeding bull. I could not keep it, could not look at it every day and remember, but I did not want to punish it for something it could not help. So I sold it, and I used the money to pay for Thomas's headstone. Cole reached over and took her hand. That must have been hard. It was, Sarah said, but it was also the right thing to do. Holding on to anger and blame would not have brought Thomas back. It would only have poisoned me from the inside out. I chose to let it go, to focus on moving forward instead of dwelling on what I could not change. You amaze me, Cole said quietly. The way you can take something so painful and find a way through it without becoming bitter or broken. I think everyone has that ability, Sarah said. Most people just do not realize it. We are stronger than we think we are, more resilient. Life throws terrible things at us, but we survive. We adapt. We find ways to keep going. I am starting to believe that, Cole said, because of you. Spring arrived in a burst of green and birdsong, and Sarah and Cole threw themselves into the work of planting and preparing for another season. They planted the orchard they had talked about, setting out apple and peach trees that would not bear fruit for years, but that represented faith in a future they would share. They expanded the garden, adding rows of vegetables and herbs that Sarah could sell in town. They bought 2 more milk cows and a young mare that Cole planned to train for riding. One evening in April, as they were walking the fence line and checking for damage from the winter storms, Sarah suddenly stopped and put a hand to her stomach. Cole noticed immediately and turned to her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and wonder. "Cole, I think I am pregnant." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then a slow, radiant smile spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He picked Sarah up and spun her around, laughing, and she laughed with him, giddy with the reality of it. "A baby," Cole said, setting her down carefully, as though she might break. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Sarah confirmed, and she felt tears streaming down her face, happy tears this time, tears of joy and anticipation. Cole knelt down in front of her and pressed his forehead against her stomach, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this, for everything, for saving me when I did not even know I needed saving." Sarah ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had come into her life when she least expected it, who had taught her that it was possible to be happy again, to hope again. "You saved me too," she said softly. "We saved each other." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Sarah continued working as long as she was able, with Cole taking on more of the heavy tasks and fussing over her like a mother hen. He built a cradle from smooth pine wood and painted it white, carved with tiny flowers and vines. Sarah sewed baby clothes and blankets, preparing a corner of their bedroom as a nursery. Neighbors came by to offer advice and hand me down baby items, and Mrs. Henderson threw a small party for Sarah, gathering the women of the community to celebrate the coming child. Sarah sat in the center of it all, surrounded by well wishes and laughter, and felt a profound sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. This was her community, her home, her life, and it was full of good things. In late November, on a cold night with stars bright and clear overhead, Sarah went into labor. Cole rode frantically into town to fetch the midwife, and by the time he returned, Sarah was in the grips of contractions that took her breath away. The midwife, a capable woman named Martha, who had delivered half the babies in the county, set up in the bedroom and sent Cole to boil water and gather clean linens. The labor lasted through the night and into the early morning. Cole stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement, even when Sarah was certain she could not go on. But she did go on, drawing on reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, and just as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, their son was born. Martha cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked down at the tiny, perfect face, at the miniature fingers that curled around her thumb, and felt something inside her shift and settle. This was her son. This was the future she and Cole had created together. "He is beautiful," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "He looks like you. He has your nose," Sarah said, smiling through her exhaustion. They named him Daniel after Cole's father, and he proved to be a good baby, healthy and strong. Cole was a devoted father, taking on night feedings and diaper changes without complaint, rocking Daniel when he fussed and singing off key lullabies that somehow always soothed the baby. Sarah watched them together and felt her heart grow bigger, making room for this new love that was fierce and protective and all-consuming. The first year of Daniel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small milestones. His first smile, his first tooth, the first time he rolled over and then sat up on his own. Sarah documented each moment in a journal she kept, wanting to remember every detail of this precious time. Cole continued to work the homestead, building it up little by little, making improvements and investments that would secure their future. On a warm evening in June, when Daniel was just over 6 months old, Sarah and Cole sat on the porch while Daniel played on a blanket spread on the grass. He was babbling happily, reaching for the wooden toys Cole had carved for him, and Sarah felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "Do you ever think about Thomas?" Cole asked suddenly. Sarah was not offended by the question. She knew Cole was not jealous or insecure, just curious about the woman he had married and the life she had lived before him. "Sometimes," she said honestly. "I think about how he gave me stability when I needed it, how he was a good man even if he was not the love of my life. I am grateful for what we had, even if it was not what I have with you." "Do you think he would approve?" Cole asked. "Of us, of how things turned out?" Sarah thought about it carefully. "I think he would want me to be happy," she said. "Thomas was practical like me. He would see that you are a good husband and father, that you take care of us and make this place thrive. He would approve." Cole nodded, apparently satisfied with that answer. "I hope so. I would not want him to think I was taking advantage of his death, swooping in to claim his widow." "You did not swoop," Sarah said with a small laugh. "You wandered in looking for work, and we fell in love. There is nothing dishonorable about that." "I love you," Cole said, reaching over to take her hand. "I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know that it is true. Every day I wake up and feel grateful that I found you, that you gave me a chance when I did not deserve one." "You deserved a chance," Sarah said firmly. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over, to build something new from the ruins of what was lost. You taught me that, just as much as I taught you." As the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah picked up Daniel and held him close, breathing in the sweet baby smell of him. Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they sat together as a family watching the day fade into night. Sarah thought about all the tragedies and losses that had brought them to this moment, and she felt only gratitude. Without Thomas's death, she would never have met Cole. Without Cole's losses in Texas, he would never have come to Nevada. Every pain, every setback, had been a stepping stone leading them to this place, this life, this love. "I used to think that bad things just happened for no reason," Sarah said quietly. "That tragedy was meaningless and random, but now I think maybe everything happens for a reason, even if we cannot see it at the time. All the pain and loss we have both experienced brought us here together. It made us who we needed to be, to recognize each other, to appreciate what we have." Cole kissed the top of her head. "I do not know if I believe in fate or destiny," he said, "but I believe in you. I believe in the way you take tragedy and transform it into something meaningful. That is your gift, Sarah. You do not just survive difficult things. You use them to become stronger, kinder, more appreciative of the good things in life, and you inspire everyone around you to do the same." Sarah leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "We inspire each other," she said. "That is what love is, I think. Not just passion or romance, but being with someone who makes you want to be better, who helps you see the world in a new way." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, bright pinpricks of light against the darkening sky. Daniel had fallen asleep in Sarah's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Sarah looked down at him and then up at Cole, and she felt a wave of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing hope, for choosing me." "Thank you for teaching me how," Cole whispered back, "for showing me that there is always light in the darkness, always something worth fighting for." As the seasons passed, Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, taking his first wobbly steps and speaking his first words. Cole proved to be a patient teacher, showing Daniel how to feed the chickens and pet the horses gently. Sarah watched her son learn about the world with wonder and curiosity, and she made sure to teach him the same lessons Cole had taught her about resilience and hope and finding the good in every situation. The homestead continued to prosper. Cole's improvements and Sarah's careful management meant they were able to expand their operations, buying more land and livestock. They hired occasional help during busy seasons, but mostly they worked together as a family, building something that would last beyond their lifetimes. One afternoon in early autumn, when Daniel was 3 years old, Sarah was working in the garden when she felt the now familiar sensation of being watched. She looked up to find Cole standing at the fence, his eyes soft with affection. "What are you staring at?" she asked, smiling. "Just admiring my wife," Cole said, coming into the garden to join her, "and thinking about how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," Sarah said, brushing dirt from her hands. "I think we are both lucky," Cole said, pulling her close. "We found each other when we both needed someone most. We built this life together from nothing but hope and hard work. And we have Daniel, the best thing either of us has ever done." Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you ever miss Texas?" she asked. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "I miss the person I thought I was going to be," he said finally. "The man who had a ranch and a plan and everything figured out, but I do not miss Texas itself. This is home now. You and Daniel are home." "I am glad you came here," Sarah said. "Even though the circumstances that brought you were painful, I am glad it happened. Does that make me terrible?" "No," Cole said firmly. "It makes you human. It makes you someone who understands that good things can come from bad situations, that life is complicated and messy and full of contradictions. You do not have to feel guilty for being happy, Sarah. Thomas would want you to be happy. Your parents would want you to be happy. And I want you to be happy." "I am," Sarah said simply. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." That evening, as they were putting Daniel to bed, Sarah realized she had something important to tell Cole. She waited until Daniel was asleep, his small body curled under the quilt Sarah had made for him, and then took Cole's hand and led him out to the porch. "I need to tell you something," she said. Cole's expression immediately became concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Sarah assured him. "Better than fine." "Cole, I am pregnant again." Cole's face went through a rapid series of emotions, from shock to joy to wonder. Then he pulled Sarah into his arms and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "Another baby," he said, his voice muffled. "We are going to have another baby. Are you happy?" Sarah asked, even though she could feel his happiness radiating from him. "I am beyond happy," Cole said, pulling back to look at her. "I am grateful and amazed and a little bit terrified, if I am being honest. But mostly, I am just so full of love for you and for this life we are building together." The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Sarah knew what to expect, or perhaps because her body had done this before. She worked through most of it, with Cole and even Daniel helping where they could. Daniel was excited about becoming a big brother, though Sarah was not sure he fully understood what that meant. In May of 1882, Sarah gave birth to their daughter. The labor was quicker this time, and by midday, Martha was handing Sarah a tiny red-faced baby girl who wailed with impressive volume. Cole cried when he held her, tears streaming down his face as he counted her fingers and toes and marveled at how small and perfect she was. "What should we name her?" Sarah asked. Cole looked at Sarah with so much love it took her breath away. "What about Clara?" he suggested. "After your mother." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. She had told Cole about her mother months ago, about how she had been kind and patient and had always found ways to make difficult times bearable. "Clara," she repeated. "Yes, I love that." Clara proved to be an easier baby than Daniel had been, content to sleep long stretches and rarely fussing. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding times. Sarah watched her two children together and felt a fierce protectiveness combined with overwhelming gratitude. This was her family, these people who loved her and whom she loved in return. As Clara grew, the homestead continued to thrive. Cole had become an expert at managing the livestock, and Sarah's garden produced more than enough vegetables to feed the family and sell in town. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, secure in a way neither of them had been before they met each other. One evening, when Clara was 2 years old and Daniel was 5, the family gathered for supper around the table Cole had built himself. Daniel was telling an animated story about a frog he had found by the creek, complete with sound effects and dramatic gestures. Clara was banging her spoon on the table, laughing at her brother's antics. Sarah and Cole exchanged glances across the table, sharing a moment of perfect understanding. After the children were in bed, Sarah and Cole sat on the porch, as they did most evenings, enjoying the cool night air and each other's company. Sarah had brought out a blanket, and they sat close together, Cole's arm around her shoulders. "Do you remember the day we met?" Sarah asked. "At Thomas's funeral?" "Of course I remember," Cole said. "You were standing so straight and strong, like you were carrying the weight of the world, but refusing to let it break you. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." "I was not brave," Sarah said. "I was just numb, going through the motions because I did not know what else to do." "That is a kind of bravery," Cole insisted. "Showing up, doing what needs to be done, even when you are hurting. You do not give yourself enough credit." Sarah thought about the woman she had been 4 years ago, standing beside Thomas's grave with dry eyes and a plan for what to feed the chickens. She felt almost unrecognizable from that person now. "You changed me," she said. "You showed me that there was more to life than just surviving. You taught me about joy and passion and what it means to really love someone." "And you taught me about hope," Cole said. "You showed me that loss does not have to define you, that tragedy can be a beginning instead of an ending. Every day with you is a gift, Sarah. Every single day." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the homestead, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the trees. Sarah thought about all the losses that had brought them to this point, about Thomas and Cole's ranch in Texas and her parents and brother. She thought about how easy it would have been to become bitter, to let grief and disappointment turn her hard and cynical. But she had chosen a different path, a path that led to hope and love and a future worth living. And in doing so, she had helped Cole choose that path too. They had saved each other, not from death or disaster, but from the slow suffocation of hopelessness. They had found each other in the midst of tragedy and created something beautiful from the wreckage of their old lives. "I love you," Sarah said, turning to look at Cole in the dim light. "I love the life we have built together. I love our children and our home and the way we work together to make something meaningful out of each day." "I love you too," Cole said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love everything about you, everything about this life. I never thought I would be this happy, this content. You gave me that, Sarah. You gave me everything." As the years passed, Daniel and Clara grew into bright, curious children who loved the homestead and the rhythms of ranch life. Daniel was serious and thoughtful, already showing an aptitude for working with animals. Clara was spirited and fearless, always climbing trees or exploring the creek or coming home covered in mud with a huge smile on her face. Sarah and Cole watched their children grow with pride and wonder, guiding them gently and giving them the freedom to discover who they were. They taught Daniel and Clara the same lessons they had taught each other about resilience and hope and finding the good in every situation. They told them stories about their grandparents and the hardships previous generations had endured, making sure their children understood that they were part of a larger story, a history of people who had survived and thrived against impossible odds. The homestead continued to expand. When Daniel was 10, they bought the adjacent property from a neighbor who was moving east. The additional land meant they could run more cattle, and plant more crops, and the family worked together to clear new fields and build new structures. It was hard work, but it was satisfying work, the kind that left you tired but proud at the end of each day. Cole had become a respected figure in the community, known for his fairness and his skill with horses. People came from miles around to buy horses he had trained or to ask his advice on ranching matters. Sarah had become known for her garden and her preserves, which she sold at the general store in town. She also began taking in sewing work, making clothes and quilts for families throughout the area. One day, when Sarah was 32 years old, she received a letter that changed everything. It came from a lawyer in Sacramento, California, informing her that her brother Matthew had died and left her a small inheritance. Sarah had not heard from Matthew in over 15 years, had long ago accepted that she would probably never see him again. To learn that he had died was painful, but to learn that he had thought of her at the end, that he had wanted her to have what little he had accumulated, brought tears to her eyes. The inheritance was not large, but it was enough to make a difference. Sarah and Cole discussed what to do with the money, considering various options. In the end, they decided to use it to build a proper schoolhouse on their land. The nearest school was 5 miles away in town, and the journey was difficult in winter. If they had a school on their property, not only could Daniel and Clara get an education without the long commute, but they could offer the same opportunity to other children in the area. They hired a teacher, a young woman named Elizabeth, who had moved to Nevada from Pennsylvania, and opened the school in the fall of 1888. 6 children attended that first year, including Daniel and Clara. The school quickly became a central gathering place for the community, hosting spelling bees and Christmas pageants and Saturday night dances. Sarah thought often of her brother, of the gold he had chased and never found, of the hard life he must have lived in the California mining camps. She thought about how his death had brought education to children who might not otherwise have had access to it, how his final act of love toward his sister had rippled outward to benefit an entire community. It was another example of finding good in tragedy, of transforming loss into something meaningful and lasting. Matthew would be proud, Cole said one evening, as they watched the school children playing in the yard during recess. He would be happy to know that his money went to something like this. I think so too, Sarah agreed. I wish I could tell him, could thank him for thinking of me. But maybe this is my way of honoring him, making sure his sacrifice mattered. Cole took her hand and squeezed it gently. You honor people by living well, by taking what they gave you and using it to make the world a little bit better. That is what you do, Sarah. That is who you are. As Daniel entered his teenage years, he began taking on more responsibility around the ranch. He was tall and strong, with Cole's build and Sarah's steady temperament. He worked alongside his father, learning everything Cole could teach him about ranching and business and how to be a good man. Clara, meanwhile, showed an aptitude for learning that delighted her teacher Elizabeth. She read voraciously and asked endless questions about everything from science to history to philosophy. Sarah and Cole watched their children develop their own interests and personalities, and they made sure to support whatever paths Daniel and Clara chose to pursue. When Daniel expressed interest in veterinary medicine, Cole found books on animal husbandry and anatomy for him to study. When Clara said she wanted to be a teacher like Elizabeth, Sarah arranged for Clara to help with the younger students, giving her experience in the classroom. The homestead became more than just a ranch. It became a community hub, a place where neighbors gathered to share news and help each other through difficult times. Sarah and Cole hosted barn dances and harvest celebrations, opened their home to travelers who needed a place to stay, and quietly helped families who were struggling with money or illness or bad luck. They did these things not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do, because they understood that community and connection were what made life bearable. On Sarah's 35th birthday, Cole surprised her with a gift that took her breath away. He had commissioned a painter from San Francisco to create a portrait of the family. They all dressed in their Sunday best and sat for the artist over the course of 3 days, and the finished product was stunning. The portrait showed Cole and Sarah seated with Daniel and Clara standing behind them, all four of them looking healthy and happy and prosperous. It is for the future, Cole explained when he showed Sarah the finished painting, so that Daniel and Clara's children will know where they came from, will see the people who built this place and this life. I want them to know that their grandparents loved each other and worked hard and overcame terrible losses to create something beautiful. Sarah cried when she saw the portrait, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift and by the reality it represented. This was her family, these people who had come from nothing and built everything. She hung the portrait in the parlor where everyone who visited could see it, a testament to what was possible when two people chose hope over despair, love over loneliness, and possibility over resignation. The years continued to roll by, marked by small joys and occasional sorrows, the natural rhythm of life on the frontier. Sarah and Cole grew older together, their faces becoming lined and weathered, but their love remaining constant. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, welcomed grandchildren when Daniel married a woman named Rebecca, and started his own family, cheered when Clara was offered a teaching position at a school in Carson City. Through it all, Sarah maintained her fundamental belief that there was good to be found in even the darkest circumstances. When a drought threatened their crops, she organized a community effort to dig a new well. When a neighbor's child fell ill, she sat with the family and helped nurse the child back to health. When tragedy struck, whether personal or communal, Sarah was always there with practical help and quiet encouragement, showing people by example that it was possible to endure, to recover, to find meaning in the midst of pain. Cole, who had arrived at Sarah's homestead as a broken, hopeless drifter, had become a pillar of the community. He served on the town council and helped settle disputes between neighbors. He mentored young men who were trying to make their way in the ranching business, and every single day he thanked Sarah for saving his life, for showing him that it was possible to rebuild after losing everything. "You did not save me," Sarah always protested. "We saved each other." "Maybe," Cole would concede, "but you showed me how. You taught me to look for the light instead of dwelling in the darkness. That was your gift to me, and I have tried to pass it on to everyone I meet." On a warm evening in June of 1898, Sarah and Cole sat on their porch watching the sunset behind the mountains. They were both in their early 40s now, still strong and healthy, but aware that they were entering a new phase of life. Daniel and his wife had 3 children, and they lived on the northern portion of the property in a house Cole had helped build. Clara visited regularly from Carson City, bringing stories about her students and the wider world beyond Las Vegas. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Giving up the chance to start fresh somewhere else? You could have kept drifting, could have ended up anywhere. Instead, you stayed here with me." Cole looked at her with surprise. "Regret it? Sarah, staying here, marrying you, building this life with you is the best decision I ever made. It is the only decision that matters. Everything before you was just prologue. My real life started the day I walked up to your homestead and asked for work." "I felt the same way," Sarah admitted, "but I worried sometimes that maybe you felt trapped, that maybe you stayed out of obligation, or because you did not know what else to do." "I stayed because I love you," Cole said firmly. "I stayed because being with you makes me want to be better, do better, see better. You taught me that tragedy does not have to define us, that we can choose how we respond to pain and loss. You taught me hope, Sarah. Real, genuine hope for the future. That is a gift beyond price." Sarah reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You gave me the same gift," she said softly. "You showed me that love is more than just practicality and security. You taught me about passion and partnership and what it means to truly share your life with someone. You made me believe that I deserved happiness, that it was okay to want more than just survival." They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, hearts aligned. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the sky blazed with color. orange and pink and purple and gold. Sarah thought about Thomas, buried in the cemetery in town, and she felt gratitude for the life he had given her and the tragedy that had brought Cole into her world. She thought about Cole's lost ranch in Texas and the drought that had driven him west. She thought about her parents and her brother, about all the people who had died, so that she could be sitting here on this porch with this man, watching this sunset. Every loss had led somewhere. Every tragedy had contained within it the seeds of something new. That was the great secret Sarah had learned, the wisdom she had tried to pass on to her children and her community, that pain and joy were intertwined, that you could not have one without the other, and that the key to a meaningful life was not avoiding suffering, but finding ways to transform it into something beautiful. "I love you," Sarah said, turning to look at Cole in the fading light. "I will love you until the day I die, and beyond, if such things are possible." "They are possible," Cole said with certainty, "because our love is not just about us. It lives on in our children and grandchildren, in the homestead we built together, in the community we helped create. We will be gone someday, but what we built will remain. That is a kind of immortality, I think." Sarah smiled and leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his shoulder, the steady beating of his heart. "Then let us make sure we build something worth remembering," she said. "We already have," Cole replied. "We already have." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Sarah and Cole remained on the porch, content in the silence and in each other's company. They had traveled long roads to find each other, had overcome losses and tragedies that might have destroyed weaker people, but they had survived, had thrived, had created a life filled with love and purpose and meaning. Sarah thought about the woman she had been on the day of Thomas's funeral, standing dry-eyed beside his grave and thinking about chickens. That woman had been strong in her own way, but she had been incomplete, had not yet learned that strength without hope was just stubbornness. Cole had taught her about hope, and she had taught him how to find it even in the darkest places. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone. The homestead would pass to Daniel someday, and he would pass it to his children, and on through the generations. The schoolhouse would continue to educate children from the surrounding area. The community they had helped foster would go on supporting its members through good times and bad. And somewhere in the future, people would look at the portrait hanging in the parlor and wonder about the man and woman who had started it all, who had taken tragedy and loss and transformed it into legacy and love. That was Sarah's final gift to the world, the lesson she hoped would outlive her, that tragedy did not have to be an ending. It could be a beginning, a catalyst, a doorway into a future better than anything you had imagined. All you had to do was choose hope. All you had to do was keep moving forward, keep looking for the good, keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. And if you were very lucky, you would find someone to walk beside you through that doorway, someone who would hold your hand and share your burdens and multiply your joys. Someone like Cole, who had wandered into Sarah's life when they both needed saving, and who had stayed because he recognized something in her that he wanted to become himself. They sat on the porch until the night grew cool and the stars blazed overhead like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Then they went inside to their home, their life, their love, and they slept peacefully in each other's arms, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. And that was enough. That was everything